name is Anthony Guerreri. I'm excited to share with you our company story and talk to you about our mission and vision of our organization, and as well as talk about some of the challenges that we are facing. And man, we are facing some big challenges right now. We currently live in one of the most uncertain times that we've had in God, it's been more than a decade that we've gone through something like this. And in fact, the pandemic, it's something we haven't seen something like this in over 100 years. And so it really is truly a special time, a challenging time. But I'm here to talk to you about a more long-term problem today, a problem that's been going on for many generations. It's something that stayed with us, and it's been affecting millions, if actually billions of people on a worldwide level, which is the lack of financial understanding. The number one problem we're facing right now in the world from an economic point of view is the lack of financial literacy. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I mean, I just want to tell you briefly about myself. I've been with Evolve Financial Partners for over 22 years. I am one of the founding partners here, and it's been quite a journey to be a part of this organization, as well as a blessing. And we've been able to make an impact on thousands of people's lives, and we've been able to change a lot of people's lives over the years. So let me just kind of jump right into it and talk to you about the problem, right? When we talk about our goal is actually to stamp out financial illiteracy, not only here in Illinois, where I'm currently at, but across the United States, and then eventually to reach the global level. And how we plan to do that is we first have to recognize whether or not there is a solution. Well, if you look at the facts today, people are struggling more than ever before. We've had over 30 million people file for unemployment. The average business owner who's been tremendously impacted by this pandemic had about 2 weeks worth of money saved up. There in itself lies a big problem. And so when we look at this challenge, and we look to say, okay, how has this happened? Why are people in such financial disarray? Well, right now you can blame it on the pandemic, but if you look back just 6 months ago, unemployment was low, but savings was also very low. Understanding about how many works was no different. In fact, what this pandemic has done is it's shined a light on how bad the problem really is and how vulnerable we really were, because the minute people started to lose their income, the statistic that I've heard so many times and read about is that 1/3 of this country has less than $1,000 saved. Well, you're seeing what happens as a result of people losing their jobs. And so when you were invited here, you were invited down for maybe different reasons. Some of you were invited here to look at this maybe as a way for us to help you financially. Maybe you're a potential client. You want to learn how we educate people so we can help you create a strategy. Some of you were invited down maybe like me. You're looking for another way of earning money. You're looking for another opportunity. And currently what you're doing right now is not going to help you to accomplish what you want to do. Maybe you're a part of the medical industry, which is under tremendous amount of stress right now. I have several friends and clients of mine who work in this industry, and they're doing jobs they never signed up to do right now because of this pandemic. And frankly, they don't have any control over it because they work for an institution. Or maybe you're here because you're just looking for a second career. You love what you do, but frankly, it just doesn't provide enough income. And you want to have multiple sources of income. Maybe you've got a kid that's got to go to college, or you have young children and you want to save for their future. Whatever the reason is, we welcome you. And maybe the last type of person that was invited here, maybe you're a center of influence and a friend of yours asked you to join us this evening to learn exactly about what our company can do and how we help people, because they love your support. Maybe you're set up completely, and what we offer, whether it be a client or the business itself, a partnership you have no interest in, but you care a lot about that person and you would like to see what they're doing. So you could potentially introduce that person to your network so we can help them out. So our goal here with you is to help you believe in what we do. And so you can help us. So let me just tell you briefly about myself, so you know a little bit of background. I grew up here in the Chicagoland area, and I grew up pretty much, my parents were working class people. They didn't have much of an education. They're like many people in this country or their ancestors. They immigrated to the United States for a better opportunity because where they're from, unfortunately, the current system, whether it be political or economic, did not provide opportunity for them to want to raise their family. And luckily, my parents decided to come to this great country, and they took up jobs in the 70s in a factory where you can come to the United States back then and really with almost no education, find a job in working class, and you would get a pension, excellent health care benefits, and vacation pay. And I look at the America today, and that's not the case anymore. You come to this country and no education, you're going to have a big problem. And one of the things that they never learned was they never learned how money works. They never understood how to get their money to work for them. Only thing they ever told me and my brother, which is one of the founders here of Evolve Financial Partners, is that, go to school, get a good education so you can get a good job, and then you'll be set for life. And from their perspective, working in blue collar work, for us to go and do something that was a professional job, one that required more of the mind than the body, right, and the hands, that was a big step up. And so we did that. We followed that. We went to school. We got good grades, and I thought we made them pretty proud. Went to college, and while I was there, I was one to always look forward, and I was looking into the future and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And the more I learned about the corporate world, and this was in the 1990s, the more I was not that excited about it, because the more I understood and learned about it, what I found out is that I've seen people who had been working for companies for 20, 30 years, and one day they would just get that pink slip and they would be out of a job. And in many cases, what I found out through this company is that they didn't know how money works and they were not prepared for it. And now nobody was looking to give them an opportunity in their prime years, their golden years, to continue working. And that was the 90s. And the only people you heard getting laid off during that time was generally people that had 20, 30 years. But what happened in the 2000s, which is after I graduated college, I heard people in my age getting laid off because of the dot-com bust. And so when I looked at that, I didn't see a whole lot of certainty in that. And then I was introduced to a business called College Pro Painters. It was actually my first business that I started. It's what I was doing while I was in college. And what that was is, not to get too much into that, but what they did is they brought in college students, and it was a franchise, and they trained them A to Z on how to build your own business during the summertime. So, and really through the spring season into the summer. So they would recruit college students, and then they would train them to go out there and build their own business during the summertime, where they would paint people's houses, and you can make pretty good money doing that. When I did that, what I learned is I learned a couple things. I learned, number one, how to work really hard. And number two, I learned about running a system. I learned about, if you follow a system in business using someone else's knowledge, you just have to apply your work ethic. You can become successful. And I did that, and I did pretty good with that. But while I was doing that, I was introduced to this. And my brother at the time was a couple of years older than I was, and he had finished college, and he was now in the corporate world, working for a bank, and I was still in school running this other business. And he invited me, and he said, come take a look at what we're doing here, and because we're really providing financial education to people that our parents never had. And so when I went to take a look at it, and I learned one of the principles you're going to learn here tonight, it blew my mind. And the first thing I thought was, how come people from our background had no idea about these principles, how to make your money grow, about how taxes work? And I thought it had everything to do with the fact that my parents were immigrants and we were a working class. And it was really just our group that didn't know how this stuff worked. But as I got into it and learned more about the organization, I found out that the people that were first, second, and third generation in this country were worse off than a lot of the people that were immigrants. Because not only did they not know how money worked, they taught those bad habits to their kids into that next generation. And so when I saw this, I said, I looked at that other business I was doing, which was pretty good. It was labor intensive. But one of the biggest problems I had with that business was that the people who worked for me, they were exactly that. They're employees. They would never have the same opportunity that I had in being the owner of that business. And so therefore, as soon as I brought in a good person to work with me, they would leave me to go start their own operation or get their own franchise. When I came here and I started learning about this mission to help people, not only did I see a chance to help people like my family, but I saw an opportunity to give other people the same chance, the same business platform where they can be successful. And so when I got into it, I started to learn about what's the difference between truly successful people, the wealthy, and pretty much people like where we came from. Because growing up, I thought rich people were just lucky. They were just born that way. And what I found out is the vast majority of millionaires in this country are self-made. And the more I met people that had achieved that, the more I opened up my mind. And I remember one of the books they first introduced me to reading was a book called Think and Grow Rich. And I tell you, that book was the best book I ever read. All the books I read while I was in school and studying, that was the one that had the most profound impact on my life, because it was a story of a gentleman named Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill was a freelance writer. I think he worked for a magazine in the 1920s. And one of the interviews that he conducted at that time, he had an opportunity to interview Andrew Carnegie. If you've never heard of Andrew Carnegie, you can look him up. He is a titan in the Industrial Revolution. And he's part of the Industrial Revolution, the Rockefellers, right? You've heard of John Rockefeller and Thomas Edison. And that gentleman, along with many other, helped build the foundation to make this country the superpower that it is today. So anyways, while Napoleon Hill was doing his 3-hour interview, it ended up turning into a 3-day interview. And while Andrew Carnegie was sitting there, he had a feeling that him and Napoleon Hill were onto something. And so what he did is he said, I'll tell you what, Mr. Napoleon, I will introduce you to all of my successful friends. I think it was about 500 people. That included presidents, included Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Wrigley, and all the great business titans of that time, influential leaders, politicians, presidents, like I said, prime ministers. I will introduce you to them, and then I want you to write a book, all the things that you find that are key principles in all of those people, and then make sure you can get that message out. And that's exactly what he did. And those 14 principles came out of that book. And so as I started to read that book, what I realized is that none of these people were lucky. What these people were is they just had the right principles, they were determined, and they went to solve a really big problem. The most successful ones solved the biggest problem. Andrew Carnegie made his fortune in steel. You see all the big buildings today. We wouldn't have that without that. We know Thomas Edison invented the light bulb with, that changed everything. Everything was lit by candles back then. A lot of fires, very dangerous, and so on and so forth. And so as I started to relate that to what I was doing here, I said, no, there's this huge problem of financial literacy. The middle class, working class, the majority of people out there just don't understand how money works. And so it was a moment of truth for me, and I decided that I was going to leave that other business. I almost left school, but I didn't. I stuck it out. I decided I was going to finish my school, and I put all my energy into working with the organization, and I started an internship. And I'll tell you, I was really scared at first. I was full of a tremendous amount of fear because it was an area I didn't know anything about. It required me to talk to people, which was always, it was a challenge in my previous business. This one required even more of that. And frankly, like I said, I was full of fear. So I started attending trainings like this. At the time, everything was obviously live, right? We had to drive to an office to learn, and had to have an instructor there. But that was the beginning of my change, and ultimately led to me going full time in this business in 1998, and which led to us developing Evolve Financial Partners. And really, what we are is we're an advocates for your legacy. We want to help people create lasting legacies for generations to come. And I tell you, that's so important because the majority of people do not leave great legacies. They leave legacy of challenges for their family. And we want to change that because there's a saying, okay, and this is important. And I heard this, it made a lot of sense to me. So the first generation that makes it in this country, they make the money. The second generation, they spend the money. And the third generation, they lose it. How can that happen? That happens because of lack of financial understanding. All right, so let's get into the wealth crisis. Let's get into our company and, really what we are here to do, okay? When we look at the wealth crisis, why does that happen, okay? Well, people just simply don't have control of their income and they don't have control of money, okay? When we look at the industry that we're part of, we're part of the largest industry in the world, which is the financial industry, okay? You take the real estate industry and the retail industry, which has been, oh my God, lately it's just been hit so hard with everything that's going on. But even before this pandemic and everything, if you combine those two industries together, the financial industry is the largest industry in the world, okay? So we're talking about the most powerful and most influential, but yet, as big as this industry is, most people are in the dark about how to manage their money. There's a massive need, which equals a huge opportunity. Just think back to our founding industrial fathers, right? We talk about, like I said, Andrew Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie he's like a Jeff Bezos. So if you know what Jeff Bezos is, the founder, everyone knows what Amazon is, right? Bill Gates, everybody knows who Bill Gates is in the late, he'll come to me. Steve Jobs, excuse me. So, I mean, these guys, they're the modern day, right? Business titans, right? Well, Andrew Carnegie was worth about $500 million. If you were to put that in today's dollars, some people say that would have been worth over somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 billion. So it's pretty impressive. So anyways, going back to this massive opportunity of the millennial generation, right? So here we are, the millennial generation, the biggest generation right now. They've now surpassed the baby boomers. They're expected to inherit $68 trillion over the next 25 years, okay? But many millennials right now are struggling, okay? They can't find jobs. They're right now, many of them are unemployed, and simply they have a tremendous amount of debt, okay? So they're looking for better opportunity, and many of them are entrepreneurial oriented. You have the Generation Xers, which is my generation, the generation that makes up 65 million of us. And many of this Generation Xers right now, they haven't saved enough for retirement. And then, of course, we have the baby boomers. Nearly 6 in 10 don't know how much or what type of insurance coverage to buy. So financial illiteracy. How can it really be the number one economic crisis in the world? Well, we've done a study on it. In fact, the company that owns us, our parent company. So every one of us that works with our organization, we are independent. We work for ourselves, but we have a parent company that provides us massive backing and that we're part of. And that's Aegon. In fact, they are publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay. And they did a global survey, just a basic financial literacy study. Okay. And what they found is that 70% of the people in the world are financially illiterate. In fact, we have our own quiz that tests people's financial literacy. If you're interested in taking the short quiz, it's only 5 questions. We'd love to see how you'd score on that. The majority of people fail it, okay? And it just proves it. Now, this is what's the most disturbing thing that is just hard to believe, that the United States of America ranks 7th when it comes to financial literacy in the world. We are behind India and Spain. How can we be the richest country in the world, the wealthiest? It's not even close wealth-wise. We're the largest, biggest economy in the world, but we are 7th in financial literacy. Could it be we don't teach our kids how money works? Could it be that the parents don't understand how money works? One of the easiest ways to teach financial education could be done in the school system, but it hasn't happened. In fact, there's only 21 out of 50 states that require even basic financial education for their students on high school level. I was fortunate through the years of experience here, I had an opportunity to meet one of the ladies that was really key in helping that law pass here in the state of Illinois, which was really just a couple of years ago, because I remember looking back about 8 years ago, and there was only, I believe, 4 states in the entire country that provided basic financial literacy. Now we're up to 21. And so I met with the lady, and she said, yeah, we just had passed that law now, so we were going to be requiring that in high school. I'm like, oh, that's great. She goes, yeah, it's great, but the problem is the teachers are not financially literate. So it's one thing to have the law, it's another thing to how are we actually going to implement that. And that's really one of the reasons why we exist as a company, is because the school system isn't doing it. So we've got to provide that education, and we do the complete process. Not only do we provide the education, we provide the strategies and solutions to actually implement those things, okay? Our mission, stamp out financial literacy everywhere, as I mentioned before. Now, our group here, as I said, we're independent. We are the Evolve Financial Partners, right? We work together here locally, and now we've expanded throughout the country. But we're also part of a larger platform called WealthWave, which is actually in all 50 states. There's thousands of reps throughout the country. And that's what's great about that, is we get to leverage the platform that they offer us, as well as their experience and their knowledge. So when we look at the problem of how money works, and we looked around and we tried to say, well, where is the solution to this problem, right? It's not in the textbook. I mean, how many books have been written on finance? Just go out there and Google financial books. There's thousands of financial books out there. So many financial books out there. I think there's books on how money works, right? Money for Dummies. And yet the problem is those books are very thick, and most people don't understand them, okay? And so we wanted to write a book and create a book that everyone can understand. In fact, we specifically wrote this book so that an 8th grader could comprehend it and actually apply the knowledge. It's one thing to read something and somewhat understand it. It's another thing to read it and be able to apply it. And so we actually partnered with, this is an incredible story behind how this book came together. One of the founders of our company, almost 40 years in practice now, a gentleman named Tom Matthews. He's an expert in the financial world, and obviously being almost 40 years doing it. Well, he partnered up with a best-selling author called Steve Siebel. And these guys are really very successful in our industry and really in the business world. And Steve is on TV on a regular basis. In fact, right now, he's been on a book tour up until the pandemic, and now he's doing a lot of Zoom interviews. But they had done a tour all across the country promoting the book, How Money Works. But just to tell you a little bit about Steve, Steve is a New York Times best-selling author. He wrote the book, How Rich People Think. In fact, Steve comes from humble beginnings, and he comes here he grew up in the Chicagoland area as well. And when he was younger, he was a professional coach, and he used to coach professional athletes, okay? And so then he took that mindset and he brought it into the business world. And so he spent his entire life studying rich people. In fact, he has the largest study ever done on millionaires with over 1,300 interviews. It's almost like a modern day Napoleon Hill. As I mentioned earlier, Napoleon Hill did those interviews back in the day, right, in the 20s. Well, he's done that now in the modern time. And what he did is he took all the information he learned and he's put it in these books that he's written. And this is his most recent. And the reason why I decided to write this book is because he after being a consultant to our company, so the other thing that Steve does is a consultant to companies like GE, Mercedes-Benz, Johnson & Johnson, Toyota. So these companies have hired him as a consultant, paid him good money to teach their employees how to be better at what they do, how to make those companies more successful. And he's been a consultant to our firm for now, I believe, is about 15 years. So over the years, he learned a lot about us, and he decided that he was going to do a 6-month project and study and research our firm. And after doing that, he was so impressed with what we did, he decided to partner with us. And after he partnered with us, that's when they got the idea that they wanted to write a book that combined his knowledge of how the wealthy people think. Remember, self-made, not people who had that money handed to them, very different. People who created it, first generation, right? And he took the brain of Tom Matthews, who has the experience, who sat down, and his organization has helped thousands, if not millions of people throughout the years with their services. And then they brought in another gentleman, Andy Horner, who is really the marketing genius behind the pictures and stuff. And what they did is they created comic book characters to make this book very fun, easy to understand, and created different characters so we can relate with all these different types of personality. And I tell you, it's an incredible book, very easy to read, simple to understand. And but anyway, this is where it all begins for us. And then from here, we have a master's class. So now we've got the book, and now we've got classes to follow up to help you understand these concepts so you can apply that. Okay. This meets 100% of the criteria that it takes to have an effective class, right? It's one thing. I mean, once again, think about how many diet books are out there, right? Think about how many books there are about health, right? And how many books about finances. But here's what we found out. Just because you read a book about something, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do anything about it. Because humans, left to our own willpower, unfortunately, we don't follow through. Many of us do not. And so not only do we provide the classes, the book, but we have the experts, the financial educators that can sit down with you and help create a strategy that encompasses all of these important things. Because the important thing is that you got to be honest. You got to know where you're really at. Then you got to know the simple concepts so you can understand. And then you got to create a strategy for where you are currently at right now. That's going to help you move forward. Okay. What we teach, the realities, the concepts, and the strategies. Okay. And once again, once you have that knowledge, then we can start communicating with you and start moving you in the right direction. So why is this the number one problem in America? Well, here are the numbers, everybody. 44% of Americans don't have enough cash to cover a $400 emergency. This is worse than the statistic I quoted earlier. 44% of Americans don't have enough cash to cover a $400 emergency. Wow. Is it because they didn't have enough income? Maybe that's part of it. A big part of it, though, is because they don't understand how money works. 43% of student loan borrowers are not making payments. The student loan crisis in this country it just got worse. Right now we have $1.6 trillion of student loan debt. You know what's unique about that debt? You can't bankrupt your way out of it. If you go back just before the 2008 crisis, we had just under $400 billion. Now that's a lot. But then what they did is they changed the laws and they made it even harder, unfortunately. I don't want to get into all that, but the bottom line is we're now up to $1.6 trillion. And so many people may never pay that back. Many people are waiting to start their families, buy homes, and it's really impacting that millennial generation. But I'll tell you, I have a client who's a baby boomer who's still paying on their student loan debt. In fact, she just crossed 60 years old. So there are people right now who are having their checks garnished from their Social Security to pay for their student loans. Okay, we have strategies to help people with the current student loans as well as how to make sure they don't get in debt in the first place or minimize that. $9,300 the average credit card. If you pay the minimum, it'll take you 30 years to pay that back. And 33% of American adults have zero in retirement savings. That's Sarah right there with her quote. And it really is difficult to process this.